Hello everyone and welcome to another one of our Odinism versus Christianity videos. Today we will be comparing the office of a druid versus that of a prophet. When it comes to who we trust to teach us about who God is, what they are like, and what they expect from us, more information is ideal when it comes to, if for no other reason, than giving us reasons why we should trust what they have to say. Anyone can claim that their teachers are infallible. Anyone can say they heard from God. What I want to do is make a side-by-side comparison as to what we actually have in writing regarding the spiritual authorities that authored the Bible compared to those that were looked to that would hear from the gods, perform the rituals that were handed down to them regarding, and this is key, authentic and acceptable worship. Note that I will not resort to hearsay or speculation. I will not accept foreign sources like the Roman pagans, nor will I acknowledge Christian sources like I'm sure that my pagan friends will find respectful. If I make a claim, it's going to be supported from historical sources that came from the adherents themselves or not at all. So with that standard being set out, we're going to be discussing 5 things regarding the comparison of druids and prophets. The first will be the definitions of each term, what it means to be a druid, what it means to be a prophet. Second, the requirements, what qualified someone to be a prophet or a druid. Third are the responsibilities, what was required of a prophet or a druid. And of course, as well, what were the standards of accountability? What would happen if someone failed to uphold the standards held to their office? What reason would you have to stay a good druid or a good prophet? And what were the consequences if you didn't? And then finally, the reliability. What has come from those works in history? So starting with the definitions, what does it mean to be called a prophet or a druid? Well, the word prophet, in Hebrew, nabah, means a spokesman, someone who speaks on behalf of another. In the case of Christianity or in Judaism, that would be God. A druid literally means an oak seer. Linguistically, it's associated with a lot of words, some Greek, some Latin, and some Celtic, but it mainly comes from the Greek word drus, which is how it's generally translated, and again in Latin as well. But the Celtic words for tree and know are mainly how we understand them. And the oak being the sacred tree of Odin, this is generally how we would associate them as the priestly class in Celtic lore. Note as well, anything beyond this is speculation from sources other than the adherents themselves. So as stated at the beginning of this study, I will not acknowledge them lest the accusation is made that I'm misrepresenting history or reading revisionists, like, for example, Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars. That's the first written historical source that mentions the Druids. However, it's not a primary source, so we won't go into his definitions. Second is the requirements, what qualified someone to be a prophet or a druid. Well, a prophet, as a spokesman for God, would be held to the same standard that Israel's first prophet, Moses, set. This included public miracles, accurate predictions, daily mortal accountability, and consistent theology from Moses. So if you deviated or taught in the name of a different God than Moses, you would be in trouble. But this is the standard that would be laid forward for anyone who claimed to be a prophet. You were claiming to be this is what that means of you. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 18 through 22, again, Deuteronomy being the 5th book of the books of Moses, the Torah, was interestingly enough written at the end of his life to clarify the ministry that he had made and the impact that he left on Jewish history up until that point. Deuteronomy means second law. Speaking, of course, on behalf of God, God is speaking. I will raise up for them a prophet like you, speaking to Moses, from among their brethren. I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. So there will be accountability to those who not only adhere to, but don't adhere to what this prophet says, because he's speaking it in the name of God. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or not come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. Makes sense. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously, you shall not be afraid of him. So in this passage and others, we can look at the end of Deuteronomy as well, where it notes what it means to be like Moses, performing signs and wonders and so forth in the sight of Israel. But once again, clarifying, the requirements for someone to be a prophet of God in the Jewish context was accurate predictions, public miracles, daily mortal accountability. If he made a false prophecy, he would die, and of course, consistent theology. He'd be talking about the same God that Moses talked about. As far as a Druid is concerned, what qualified someone to be a Druid? We don't know. There are no written records that we can examine or test regarding the recruitment process of a Druid. It's all speculation, so it won't be acknowledged since we want to be accurate in representing both views. Third is the responsibilities. What's required of a prophet or a Druid? A prophet, as a spokesman for God, they would be the teachers of the law. They would be recorders of Jewish history and theology. They would be legal arbiters and judges, lawyers in a sense, but judges as well, appointing those in positions of leadership, like the prophet Samuel, for instance, and being sources of Jewish revelation about God. So if you were to hear something new about God, it would have to come from someone claiming to be a prophet who would fit the requirements of our previously mentioned point. Some examples, I won't read all of them, but you can look these up on your own time. In 2 Kings 2, verses 3 through 13, we have an instance of a mantle of leadership as the head of the prophets. The prophet Elijah at the time of the 8th century BC was passing his mantle on to the prophet Elisha. And we see that there were multiple attendees of these groups or schools of prophets that were under his leadership and wanted to know who is the one to inherit Elijah's mantle. Now, another example would be in Deuteronomy 33 and verse 10, where Moses, speaking, clarifies the teachers of the law would be designated to the tribe of Levi, the priests. In Isaiah 28, verses 9 through 15, Isaiah responds to the criticism regarding his style of teaching the law. So, being from the tribe of Judah, obviously, he was also, as a prophet of God, an example of someone who taught the law. You aren't criticized for something you've never done. This was before the internet. In the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, we have the prophet Ezra being called for the regular public reading and teaching of the law of God to the nation. In the same chapter, verses 7 through 9, it mentions a series of individuals who I will not attempt to pronounce, but among them and the Levites, it says they helped the people to understand the law, and the people stood in their place. So they read distinctly from the book in the law of God, and they gave the sense and helped them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, who was governor, Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who taught the people, said to all the people, "This day is holy to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep," for they all wept when they heard the word of the Lord, or the words of the law. In Deuteronomy chapter 21 and verse 5, it notes again the same point in chapter 33 and verse 10, "Then the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister to him and to bless in the name of the Lord." Now note this, which, and this is key, by their word every controversy and every assault shall be settled. So under the authority of these individuals, they would be given legal credence as well. Same point is made in Deuteronomy 17, verses 8 through 12. "If a matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between degrees of guilt for bloodshed, between one judgment or another, between one punishment and another, matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise to go up to the place that the Lord your God chooses. You shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to judge there in those days, and inquire of them. They shall pronounce upon you the sentence of judgment. You shall do according to the sentence which they pronounce upon you in that place which the Lord chooses. and you shall be careful to do according to all that they order you, according to the sentence of the law which they instruct you, according to the judgment which they tell you. And it goes on to note, don't deviate from this. It's from me. It bears my authority. It also notes as well, if he acts presumptuously and will not heed the priest, he shall die. You shall put away that evil from Israel. So there would be capital offenses for disregarding the penalties, punishments, or even fines that the Levites enacted out. Why? Because they were representatives of God. They were priests. They were prophets. They were spokesmen. Also note, if you want an example of the right to a fair trial in ancient history, I recommend looking up Joshua chapter 20 in the establishment of the cities of refuge, where if a incident of manslaughter, not murder, but manslaughter, took place, an accidental killing, it was the law of the land, and still is, unfortunately, due to the advent of Islam, but for a family member to avenge anyone killed in their family. So this avenger of blood, as they were called, would go to kill the person, and it was generally accepted that's retribution, that's acceptable. But in Israel, it was going to be different. There would be 6 cities made equidistantly throughout the entire nation that someone could run to, a single day's journey, where they would be given safe harbor and they would hear their case. Then the high priest would either decide the case as they're innocent and they would live in that city of refuge. The avenger of blood couldn't touch them. They would live there until the day the high priest died. Or in the case where they were guilty of premeditation, you can read this in Exodus 21, it wouldn't matter if they had gone to the city of virtue, they would be handed over to be executed. Now, regarding the Druids, what were the responsibilities of a Druid in the ancient Celtic culture? We don't know. We have no record of a Druid performing any rituals, ceremonies, or anything that has been written by the Celtic pagans who lived at the time the Druids existed. Since we don't want to depend on the hearsay or potential corruption of Roman pagans and Christians, we can't say anything. Fourth, accountability. What happens to prophets or Druids if they fail the standards held to their office? Well, a prophet in Israel, if they were to fail one of the standards that they were upheld to, accurate predictions, accurate theology, public miracles, and so forth, they'd be executed to, or sentenced to death by execution through stoning. This is Deuteronomy 13 and verse 6. If your brother, the son of your mother, your son or your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul, secretly entices you, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him, but you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. You shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So all Israel will hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. So noting, the office of a false prophet was not one eagerly sought after due to the severe legal penalties in Israel. As far as a Druid, what would happen if they were a bad Druid? We don't know. There are no historical examples of a Druid being declared a false teacher or violating the standards he was put in that position to uphold. We don't even know if there was any accountability for them if they lied. We don't know if there was any accountability for them if they failed to uphold their offices, since we don't know what that even was. We don't know how they even got into those positions. We don't know about the oaths they made and were meant to uphold. We know nothing. So ultimately and finally, regarding reliability, what has come of the work of the prophets and the Druids? Well, regarding the prophets, a lot. More specifically, the Jewish history and culture that founded Christianity and Judaism and all that they entail. what has the work of the Druids accomplished? We don't know. Thank you for your time and listening to the study. If you would like to know the reasons why you trust the ones who reveal to you the things about God, I can't recommend Norse paganism, Odinism, Asatru, or any variant. However, if you want a religion that actually tells you the reasons why we listen to these men about God and not others, I have to recommend Jesus Christ. Look forward to talking to you all again next time.